My
used to
name is
believe that
Anna,
betrayal
and this
announced
is not a
itself with
story
shouting
about
and
a
slamming doors.
necklace.it is a
With
story
lipstick on
about
collars and
silence,
late-night
about
phone
the
calls, I
kind of
believed it
silence
came
that
loudly.
settles into a
But
child's
real
bones when she
betrayal, the
learns
kind that
thoroughly
ruins
that
lives,
love can be
the kind
conditional,
that
and
steals
that
futures,
trust
it
can be
comes
revoked without
quietly. It
proof,
wears
without
familiarity, it
explanation.
sleeps beside
Without
you. Our house was
remorse.it is
quiet, too
about
quiet,
what
the
happens
kind
when a
of quiet you
child
mistake for peace.
understands that
Daniel
being
and I had
grateful
been
is
married for
expected,
16
but
years,
being
long
believed is
enough
a
to stop
privilege
asking
she may
certain
never
questions,
earn.
long enough
If you
to
had
believe
seen my
silence meant
adoptive
stability.
parents,
Lived in a
you would
beige
have
two-story
trusted them
house in a
too.
neighborhood
Everyone did.
built
They were
for
the kind of
families who
people
believed they'd
society
made it.
builds
White
narratives
fences,
around, the
identical
kind
lawns,
others
cars
point to as
parked
proof
neatly in
that
driveways.
goodness,
We weren't rich, but we were
success, and
comfortable, or so
morality
I thought.
often
Daniel
walk
worked in
hand in
finance.
hand.
He
My
spoke
adoptive
numbers
father
like a
was a
second
tall,
language. People trusted
imposing
him
man with
instinctively. Banks,
silver-streaked black
clients,
hair,
friends, and
always
my
neatly
father.
combed,
The trust fund
never a
was never meant
strand
to
out
be a
of
gift, it was
place. He
insurance. My
dressed in
father grew up
tailored
with
suits
nothing.
even
He
on
spent his
weekends,
entire life
fabrics
terrified of
chosen with
losing
care,
what he'd
pressed to
earned by the time he
perfection,
was wealthy. He
carrying
no
the
longer
faint scent
trusted
of
anyone,
cedar and
especially men who
authority.
smiled to
His
his Ollie
eyes were
before he died.
sharp,
He
observant,
called me into
always
his hospital
assessing.
room. The
The
air
kind of
smelled like
eyes that made
disinfectant
people
and
straighten
Nendings.
their
He
posture
held
when
my
he
hand
entered a
harder than
room,
necessary.
even if
This
they didn't
money
realize
isn't
they were
yours,
doing
he
it.
said. Don't
He
let
spoke
anyone
little.
convince you otherwise.
Silence was his
It was for Emily,
language.
our daughter,
But when he
education,
did
medical
speak, his
emergencies,
words
a
carried
safety
weight
net so
not
she'd
because
never
he
feel
raised
trapped.
his
The
voice,
trust
but
was locked
because
tight,
everyone
legal
knew he
language
expected
layered on top
obedience.
of legal
My
language
adoptive
restrictions
mother was
upon
elegance
restrictions.
embodied,
Daniel read every
slender,
page, signed every
graceful,
form, looked my father
porcelain
in the
skin
eye.
that
I'll
seemed
protect it, he
untouched by
said. My father
stress or
nodded, but he
time.
didn't smile.
Soft
Emily
chestnut
was
hair,
12 when
always
things began to
styled,
shift at that age
always
where children
controlled,
notice
even
everything,
at
but
home
don't
when
yet
no
know how
one
to
else
name
was
it. She
watching.
noticed her
Her
father stopped
movements were
asking about her
measured,
day. Not really,
practiced,
he
as if
listened,
she had
just
learned
enough to
early in
pretend she
life that
noticed. His phone was
emotion,
always
when
face
left in
down,
check,
always within
could
reach.
become
Even at dinner, I
dangerous.
noticed.
Her
Toby
voice
told
was
myself it was
gentle,
work.
but
I told
distant,
myself every
warm in
marriage goes through
tone,
phases.
cold
I
in
told
reach.
myself I was
She
being
was the
paranoid
kind of
because
woman
admitting
people
something
admired
was
from
wrong meant
afar,
admitting I might lose
mistaking
everything. The
restraint
first
for
warning came in an
kindness,
envelope, then
composure for
unassuming, the
compassion.
kind you
They
open without
never
sitting down.
noticed
It
how little
was from the
room there
bank
was for
routine
messiness
administrative,
in her
except
world,
the
how
numbers didn't match.
discomfort,
I
once
checked again and
detected,
again. The
was
balance in
quietly
Emily's trust
erased
fund was
rather
lower
than
than it should have been.
understood.
Not go
And
on, but
then
out
there
did
was
I.
Lucas.
Called the bank
Lucas was
immediately. My
beautiful
voice
in the
call,
way privilege
controlled.
often is
Husband, the
effortless and
representative said. I
question
laughed, not
assumed.
because it
He
was
had
funny,
my
but because
mother's
my mind
eyes,
rejected it.
warm,
That wasn't possible.
expressive,
Daniel knew the
capable of
rules. Daniel
softness when it
respected the
suited
rules.
him.
Daniel would
He
never touch
had my
money that wasn't
father's
his. That
confident
night I asked him
smile,
about it.
the kind
Hazel
that
led
suggested
carefully. He didn't
assurance
hesitate.
rather than
That was what
arrogance.
frightened me
His
most, he
hair fell
said. It was
naturally into
temporary, a
place, as
short-term
though gravity
adjustment, an
itself favored
opportunity. He
him.
smiled
His
while he
clothes
spoke,
were always
touched my hand. The
expensive,
touch
but
felt
worn
rehearsed.
casually,
I lay
as if
awake that
wealth were
night, listening
simply
to his
another layer
breathing,
of skin
wondering
he'd
when my
been
marriage
born with.
became
He
something I didn't
walked through
recognize.
the house
Trust
like
doesn't
someone who
disappear
had
all at
never
once.
once
It erodes
questioned whether he
quietly like
belonged,
water wearing down
because
stone.
he
The
never
next
had
weeks were
to.
full of
I
small
did not look
changes.
like them.
Daniel worked,
My
later
hair was
answered fewer
darker,
questions.
my
His
features
laughter
sharper,
sounded hollow.
my
Emily
presence
stopped,
quieter.
waiting up for
I
him
learned
one
early that
night. She asked
difference,
me, "Is
when
Dad mad at
unspoken,
us?" That
still
question
makes
broke something
noise. I
inside
was
me
adopted
because
at 5
I
years
didn't know
old.
how to
I
answer. I
remember the
started
office
checking
where I
things I'd never
first met
checked
them, the
before.
soft carpet
Bank
beneath my
statements,
shoes,
credit,
the
reports,
smell of
legal documents,
polished
nothing
wood and
obvious,
lemon
nothing
cleaner.
majestic, enough
Everything felt
inconsistencies to make my
oversized.
stomach
The
tighten.
chairs,
Then came
the
the photo.
desk,
It
the
wasn't sent to me. I
expectations I
found it
didn't yet know
accidentally. A woman,
existed.
young,
My
confidente,
adoptive
champagne
mother
glass
knelt in
raised in
front of me,
celebration, a new
smoothing her
office
skirt
behind her
before
and
she
on the
did,
wall.
and
Clear's,
held my
the local
small hands
the
in
investment
hers.
firm.
Her
Daniel
grip
had
was
told me he
gentle
couldn't afford.
practice.
My heart
"You're
didn't race.
safe
It dropped
now,"
straight
she said.
down. I didn't
"At that
confront him. I
age,
didn't scream.
safety
I didn't
felt like
cry. I went to
love.
the
For a
computer
few
and I
years,
read
I
every
believed I
document,
had
every
found a
clause,
home.
every
I believed
transaction.
the
That's when I
dinners
saw
meant
it. Yay.
family, that
Trust
the
fund
routines
liquidated,
meant
transferred,
care,
moved.
that the quiet
Signed
meant
by my
peace.
husband. He
Then
hadn't
Lucas
just
was
borrowed from our
born,
daughter.
and
He
slowly,
had
so
sold her
slowly,
future.
no one could
That
have
night,
pointed
Daniel
to the
slept
moment it
peacefully. I
began.
sat at the
Everything
kitchen table
changed
staring
when when
at the
Lucas
dock and for the
cried,
first
the
time in
house stopped
16 years.
breathing.
I didn't feel like a
Conversations
Wi-Fi, I felt
paused.
like a witness. I
Schedules
realized
shifted.
something. Then he
Concern
thought
filled
I wouldn't
every
fight
corner.
because
When I
I'd stayed
cried,
quiet for
doors
so long.
closed
He thought love
quietly.
made me weak.
When
He
Lucas
was
failed,
wronged. I
it
hadn't
was a
even begun
phase,
yet.
a
Asterisk
stumble,
people like to believe
something to be
affairs are about
smoothed over with
loneliness, about
reassurance.
unmet
When I
needs, about
failed,
passion.
it was
That's a lie we tell
disappointment,
ourselves to
a
make betrayal
reflection,
easier to
a
swallow. Some
flaw.
affairs
I
are
learned
about power,
quickly that
about ego,
gratitude
about
was
money. That
expected
was all
from
three.
me,
I
but
didn't
trust
confront
was
him after I
reserved for
found the
blood.
documents.
So
That
I adapted.
surprised,
I
even May
became
moved through the
observant.
house
I
like
learned
normal,
to read
packed lunches, folded
silences the
laundry,
way
asked
other
Emily
children
about
read
school life,
faces.
smiled
I
at my
learned to
husband,
understand
listened when he
glances,
talked, nodded at the
pauses,
right moment.
tones.
Speaker
I
shock has a
learned to
strange
recognize
effect
when
on the mind.
affection was
It
being
doesn't
offered
scream,
and
it
when it was
sharpens her.
being
Name
withdrawn
was
without
Laura Nye.
warning.
found
I
it in an
learned that
email thread.
survival didn't
Daniel forgot
always
to
require
delete
strength.
short messages, careless,
Sometimes it
intimate,
required
in a way that suggested
invisibility.
routine or
That
passion. Covert
intelligence
wasn't just a
quiet,
mistake. She was a
unnoticed would
plan. Lauren
later
was
become
30,
my
smart,
revenge.
ambitious.
The night
She
of my
had
adoptive
recently
mother's
launched a
birthday
startup, a
arrived like
financial
a
consulting
carefully
firm, the
directed
same
film
firm whose
set. The
logo
mansion
I had
glowed
seen in that
beneath
photo. Daniel
crystal
wasn't just sleeping
chandeliers.
with her, he
White
was
roses
funding
lined the
her with
marble
money that
halls.
belonged to
The
our
air
daughter.
was
I
thick with
learned everything
perfume,
slowly, methodically. I
champagne,
didn't
and the laughter of
spy-weighted
powerful
people
people
get
who
sloppy
believed
when
this
they think
family
they're winning.
was
Daniel talked more,
flawless. My
not
mother
less.
wore
He
an
told me
ivory
about new
gown that hugged her
opportunities,
figure
about
perfectly.
diversifying
Around her
assets. He
neck was the
spoke like a
necklace.
man who
The
believed he was
necklace was
untouchable.
legendary,
That
a
confidence, that arrogant
cascade of
side gave him
flawless
away. Emily
diamonds,
noticed before.
cold and
I said,
brilliant,
anything
worth
children
over $1
always do.
million.
She asked why Dad
It
didn't eat
wasn't
dinner with
just
us
jewelry,
anymore,
it
why he
was a
missed her
symbol
school
of
play, why he looked
heritage,
through her
of
instead at
pride,
Harry.
of
Told her he
trust.
was busy.
My
It was the
father
first
had
lie I ever told
retrieved
my
it from
daughter,
a
and it
private
tasted bitter. Lauren
international
wasn't
vault
hiding
just
that.
for this
Was the
night.
part that hurt
When my
most.
mother
She
stepped into the
posted
room,
photos, celebrations that
conversation
she
stopped.
didn't mention.
People
Daniel, but she
stared,
didn't need to.
then
His presence
applauded.
was
I
everywhere
stood
in the
near the
comments,
back,
and the timing and the
watching,
sudden
and I
influx of
remember
capital. I
thinking how
watched her build a
strange it
life
was that
using
an
what my
object
father
could
had
be
left for
cherished
Emily,
more
and
deeply than a
something inside
person who
me
had
hardened.
spent
I
her
stopped
entire life
sleeping, not
trying
from
to
fear,
belong.
from
Lucas
clarity.
moved easily among
Replayed
the
every
guests,
conversation, every
charming,
excuse,
laughing.
every
But
late
I
night
noticed
tan.
things
I
others
realized
didn't.
something.
His
Devin
fingers
Daniel
fidgeted
didn't panic when I asked
constantly.
about the
His
trust
eyes
fund,
kept
because he'd
drifting
already
toward the
prepared for that
staircase.
question. He
And
had
when my
lawyers,
mother
document
excused herself
signatures
to
he
rest
hadn't
before the
stolen
final toast,
impulsively. He had planned
Lucas
one
disappeared
afternoon.
moments
I followed
later.
him, not
I
dramatically,
noticed.
not
I
recklessly. I
always
told him I had
noticed.
errands. He
The
said he had
scream came
meetings. We
just
ended up in
after
the same
midnight.
building. Lauren's
Sharp,
office. I didn't go
terrified,
inside. I
my
didn't
mother
need toy
stood
washed from
frozen
across
in
the
her
street as
private
my husband
suite,
walked in,
staring at the
confidently,
open
not like a
velvet
man
box
visiting a
on her
mistress, like a
dressing
man coming
table.
home. I
The
cried
necklace
that
was
night,
gone
not for
in
him, for myself,
seconds.
for the
The
woman who
mansion
believed love was
transformed
protection.
from a
For the years
palace
I
into a
mistook
prison.
loyalty for safety.
Security
That was
sealed
when
the
I made a
doors.
decision. I wouldn't
Guests were
expose him.
questioned.
Not yet. He
Panic
wouldn't
spread
confront him.
like
Not ever. I
smoke,
would let him keep
seeping
talking,
into
keep
every
spending,
corner.
keep
And then,
believing he
without
was smarter than me,
hesitation,
because the truth was
suspicion
simply I
found
didn't
me.
need
You were
him to
upstairs
confess. I
earlier,
needed him
my
to
father
continue. I
said,
started
his
recording
voice
things, not
calm but
illegally,
cold.
not
You've
dramatically.
always
I
been
saved emails, downloaded
independent, my
statements,
mother
archived
added, as
calendars.
if
I learned the
independence
language of
itself were a
finance,
warning
of
sign.
legal thresholds,
Someone
of
whispered
intent.
the
I
word I had
met with a
learned to
lawyer not
fear.
to act, to
Adopted.
understand. Then another, and
Lucas stood
another. Each
beside
one
my
told me the
mother,
same thing. You
pale,
have a
trembling.
case.
She
But they
wrapped
also
an
said
arm
something else
around
if you
him,
move too early. He'll
instinctively.
hide
No one
everything.
asked
So
where
I
he had
waited at
been.
home. I
Not
became
once.
invincible. I
That was
didn't
the
argue,
moment
didn't
something
accuse,
inside
didn't
me
beg. Daniel
changed.
mistook
I
my
denied
silence
the
for surrender.
accusation
Like
calmly.
him
They
always do.
didn't
Millie asked me
listen
one night,
that
are you
night.
and
I
Dad
lay
going to get
awake in my
divorced? I
room,
looked at her,
staring
really
into the
looked, and I realized
darkness.
this wasn't
I
just about
didn't
money.
cry for
It was
long.
about teaching my
Tears
daughter
were a
something,
luxury I
that
had
betrayal has
outgrown.
consequences,
Instead,
that
I
silence
thought,
can be
and
strategic,
that
that
was where my
justice doesn't need to
revenge
be loud.
began.
I hugged her
My
and said, no matter
revenge
what
was not
happens, I
loud.
will
It
protect
was
you.
not
And for the
cruel.
first time,
It
I
was
meant it as a promise
precise. I
backed by
replayed the
action.
night
Asterisk.
in my
Lauren
mind
announced her
like a
company's
chessboard.
expansion.
The
2 weeks later,
necklace
press release
disappeared
photos,
after
smiles.
my
Daniel
mother returned
celebrated
to
with
her
champagne at home. He
suite.
raised his
The
glass to
safe
new
wasn't
the
forced.
beginnings. I
The
raised mine
alarm
to
never
end. In that
sounded.
moment, he had
Only
no idea
someone
that
who
every
knew the
dollar he
code and the
poured into her
timing could have
dream
taken it.
was building the
My
case that would
parents
destroy
or
him.
Lucas.
Silence
I knew
changes
about
meaning. When you
Lucas's
stop
problems,
being
the
afraid of IT
gambling
for years, my
debts, the
silence had been
risky
survival,
investments,
avoiding
the money
conflict,
my
keeping
parents
peace. Now
quietly
silence
paid to
became a
protect
weapon,
him from
and Daniel never saw
consequences.
it coming.
Love had
People
shielded
assume
him his
preparation
entire
looks
life
dramatic, late
before
night plotting,
dawn. I
whispers, secret
accessed the
meetings. It
security
doesn't.
system, a skill I
Preparation
had
looks like
learned
routine,
quietly,
like patience,
unnoticed.
like letting
One
someone
camera
believe they're
near my
smarter than
mother's
you.
suite had
Became
been
predictable on
disabled.
purpose. Same
Exactly
grocery
7
store, same
minutes.
schedule,
Not
same
panic,
polite questions.
intention.
Daniel
The
relaxed. That
next
was
morning, I
exactly what I
watched
needed.
Lucas
I didn't
closely.
gather
His
evidence like someone in
posture
a
was
movie. No
stiff. His
disguises, no
eyes
stolen
avoided
passwords. I
mine. His
gathered it the way
hands trembled
responsible adults
slightly.
do. Brief
Dirt
slowly,
stained his
thoroughly
shoes,
learned how trust
unusual
funds
for
work, how
someone
fiduciary
obsessed
duty
with
works, how intent
appearances.
is
A tea
proven. I learned that
breakfast.
what
I
Daniel had
finally
done
spoke.
wasn't
If
just
I
immoral,
stole
it
it,
was
I
criminal.
said evenly.
He wasn't
You'll
a desperate
find the
husband.
necklace in my room.
He was a
But if
calculated
you
one
want
that
the truth,
mattered.
search
The
every
lawyers
room.
told me something important.
Silence.
Judges don't
Lucas
respond to
dropped his
emotion, they
fork.
respond to
Security
patterns. So
searched
I built
methodically.
patterns, every
My
transfer,
room
every
nothing.
email, every
My
meeting.
parents.
I mapped
Room
timelines,
nothing.
cross-referenced
Then
dates. Lauren's
Lucas's
company
room.
didn't
He
grow
looked
organically, it
perfect
spiked.
on the surface.
Exactly when Emily's trust
Expensive
fund declined,
furniture.
Cohn said,
Everything
doesn't leave
carefully
fingerprints
arranged.
this deal.
But
Whom Daniel
perfection
grew more
often
confident.
hides
He talked freely
desperation.
about business,
A
about
guard
risk,
reached
about
into the
how some
closet
people were too
and
cautious.
picked
I
up a
nodded,
pair of
asked
old
questions,
sneakers,
encouraged him.
shoved
That part was harder
carelessly
than
into
I
the
expected
corner.
because
Out
sometimes I
of
saw the man Anna, one who held my
shook
hand in
one.
delivery rooms, who
Something
cried when
hard
Emily took her
shifted.
first steps,
The
that they need
diamonds
mention
spilled
money,
out
and
onto
the
the
mask
floor,
slipped. Lauren
wrapped
became
loosely in a
careless.
silk
Said to be
scarf.
foul. She
For a
spoke
moment,
openly in
no
interviews
one
about her
breathed. My
silent
name is
partner, about
Anna,
early
and this is
investors
not
who
a
believed
story
in her
about a
vision. She didn't name Daniil. She
necklace.it.
didn't
Is a
have
story
jewels.
about
The
silence,
fingerprints were all
about
over
the
her
kind of
success, and they
silence
started
that
pulling away
settles
from
into
her
a
father. Not
child's
dramatically,
bones when
quietly,
she
she
learns
stopped asking
thoroughly
him for
that
help.
love can
Stop
be
telling
conditional,
him things,
and
children.
that
Don't
trust can
confront
be
betrayal.
revoked
They
without
adapt to it.
proof,
Watching
without
that hurt more than
explanation.
anything else.
Without
Reminded me why I
remorse.it
couldn't
is
rush. Why
about what
I couldn't
happens when
let
a
anger
child
take the will. The
understands
breakthrough
that
came
being
from a voice
grateful is
message Daniel forgot
expected,
to delete.
but being
Ether was
believed is a
laughing, relaxed.
privilege
He
she
called
may
Emily's
never
trust
earn.
fund dead
If you
money.
had seen
Said it
my
was better
adoptive
used by someone
parents,
with vision.
you would
That
have
message
trusted
changed
them
everything
too.
because it proved
Everyone
intent,
did.
not
They were
confusion.
the kind of
Not
people
narcissistic
society
intent. I
builds
didn't play it
narratives
for
around, the
anyone. Yet
kind
he
others
saved it,
point to
backed
as
it up,
proof
stored
that
it in 3
goodness,
places. People who
success, and
underestimate quiet
morality
women
often
always
walk
forget
hand in
one thing.
hand.
We
My
remember everything
adoptive
by month
father
3.
was a tall,
Daniel stopped pretending.
imposing
He didn't
man with
hide late nights, didn't
silver-streaked
explain
black
him.
hair,
Sissy
always
assumed I
neatly
knew, and that
combed,
I'd
never
accepted
a
it. That
strand out of
assumption, that
place.
arrogance, it
He
was his
dressed in
undoing. I
tailored
filed
suits
nothing,
even on
said nothing.
weekends,
I waited
fabrics
until he made
chosen
his
with
biggest move.
care,
He transferred
pressed
the
to
remaining
perfection,
balance, the last of
carrying the
Emily's
faint
trust
scent of
fund,
cedar
into
and
Lauren's
authority.
expansion
His
account.
eyes
It
were
was the
sharp,
moment,
observant,
because
always
legally,
assessing.
that
The
crossed the line.
kind
He
of eyes
couldn't
that
walk
made
back. I
people
filed the
straighten
next
their
morning.
posture when
Not
he entered a
dramatically,
room,
not
even if
publicly.
they
Let the
didn't
system
realize
move
they were doing
quietly.
it.
The
He
way it was
spoke little.
designed, Toby, the time
Silence
Daniel
was his
realized what was
language.
happening, it was
But
too
when he
late.
did
He was
speak,
served. He
his
didn't yell,
words
he
carried
laughed. He told
weight
me I'd
not because he
misunderstood,
raised his
that lawyers
voice,
would sort
but
it out.
because
That confidence
everyone knew
lasted
he
exactly
expected
12 days.
obedience.
Lauren
My
disappeared first.
adoptive
He mailed
mother was
unanswered.
elegance
Pauls
embodied,
ignored her company,
slender,
froze accounts,
graceful,
flagged him back. Don't
porcelain
like
skin
legal
that seemed
uncertainty, neither
untouched
do
by
jazzes.
stress
Daniel
or
stopped
time.
sleeping. He
Soft
stopped
chestnut
smiling,
hair,
stopped touching
always
me for the first
styled,
time in
always
months. We looked
controlled,
at Myrtle. Ellie
even at
looked
home
tanned.
when
I
no
saw
one else
fear.
was
He asked
watching.
me why I
Her
hadn't said
movements were
anything, why I'd
measured,
waited. I told
practiced, as if
him the
she had
truth
learned
because I
early in
needed you
life
to
that
keep going.
emotion,
That was the
when left
moment.
unchecked,
He
could
understood.
become
I was never
dangerous.
behind.
Her
I
voice
was
was
ahead.
gentle,
The
but
courtroom date
distant,
was set.
warm in tone,
Suddenly, the man
cold
who
in
thought he
reach.
controlled
She
everything
was the kind
had
of
no
woman
control
people
at all.
admired
Asterisk
from
courtrooms
afar,
don't feel
mistaking
dramatic
restraint
when
for
you first walk
kindness,
into them. They feel
composure for
cold, procedural,
compassion. They
unimpressed. They
never
don't care who you
noticed how
love
little
or how
room
long
there
you
was for
stayed. They care about
messiness in her
facts. That was
world.
the
How
first thing that gave me
discomfort,
Pete's.
once
Daniel
detected,
walked into
was
court like a man
quietly
still
erased
suit,
rather than
confident posture,
understood.
a lawyer
And
who
then there
smiled
was
too much. He
Lucas.
glanced at me
Lucas
once,
was
briefly, like
beautiful in the way
I was an
privilege
inconvenience,
often is
not a threat. I
effortless,
didn't look
unquestioned,
back. I'd spent
assumed.
months
He had my
preparing for this
mother's
moment.
eyes,
I wasn't
warm,
going to waste it on
expressive,
eye contact. The
capable of
judge didn't
softness when
ask
it
about our
suited
Mars.
him.
She
He
asked
had
about
my
fiduciary
father's
duty, about
confident
authority,
smile, the kind
about
that
consenter,
suggested
about money that
assurance
belonged
rather
to a
than
childish ship.
arrogance. His hair fell
From
naturally
emotional
into
to factual
place, as
leaps,
though gravity
changed
itself favored
everything.
him.
Daniel's
His
defense
clothes were
was
always
predictable
expensive, but
misunderstanding,
worn
temporary measures,
casually. As
intent
if
to
wealth were
repay. His lawyer
simply
spoke
another
about
layer of
stress,
skin
about
he'd been born
opportunity,
with.
about
He walked
entrepreneurial
through
risk.
the
He
house
tried to
like
make it sound
someone who had
reasonable,
never
but reason
once
collapses
questioned
under
whether
company
he
transfers.
belonged,
Dates, Montreal's
because
dates,
he
amounts
never
each,
had
one
to.
aligned
I did
perfectly
not
with
look
Lauren's
like them.
company.
My hair
Milestones,
was
launch,
darker,
expansion,
my
marketing, push
features
money. Doesn't
sharper,
lie, people
my
do them.
presence
Came the voice
quieter. I
recording. I
learned
watched
early
Daniel's
that
face change.
difference,
The
when
moment his own
unspoken,
voice filled the
still makes
courtroom, calling
noise. I
Emily's
was
trust fund
adopted
dead.
at 5
Money
years
laughing. The
old.
room
I
didn't react
remember the
loudly.
office
There
where
were
I
no
first met them, the
gasps,
soft
just
carpet
silence,
beneath
the
my
kind of
shoes,
silence
the
that judges
smell of
understand
polished
very
wood
well.
and
His
lemon
lawyer
cleaner.
tried to
Everything
object to
felt
latent intent, had
oversized.
already
The
entered the room.
chairs,
Lauren
the
wasn't there.
desk,
Her
the
absence spoke
expectations
louder
I
than
didn't
her
yet know
presence ever
existed.
could. Her
My
company's
adoptive
accounts were
mother knelt
frozen.
in front
Her
of me,
investors had vanished.
smoothing
She
her
had chosen
skirt
something
before she
violent.
did, and
Survival
held
doesn't
my
include
small
loyalty.
hands
When
in
Daniel
hers.
testified,
Her
he
grip
avoided
was
my eyes. He
gentle
spoke carefully,
practice.
technically,
You're
but
safe
careful men
now,
slippy.
she said.
Admitted he hadn't
T
told
that
me, hadn't
age,
told Emily
safety felt like
that
love.
omission
For a
mattered
few
because
years, I
guardian believed I had
requires
found a home.
transparency and
I
he
believed the
had none to
dinners meant
judge.
family,
Ask one
that
final
the
question.
routines meant care,
Did you believe
that
this
the
money
quiet
belonged to
meant
you,
peace.
Daniel?
Then Lucas
Hesitated
was
that pause,
born,
that
and
single
slowly,
moment
so
it
slowly,
was
no
everything
one could
because
have
people who
pointed to the
believe they're
moment
right
it began.
don't
Everything
hesitate. The
changed
ruling came
when
swiftly.
Lucas
He was
cried.
removed as
The house
trustee.
stopped
Immediately
breathing.
assets seized, accounts
Conversations
restored,
paused.
penalties applied,
Schedules
custody
shifted.
reevaluated.
Concern
Daniel
filled
didn't lose
every
everything.
corner.
That
When I
double lost
cried,
control
doors
the source
closed
outside the
quietly.
courtroom. He
When
tried to
Lucas
speak to me,
failed,
apologized,
it was a
explanation.
phase, a
Didn't stop. Well,
stumble,
conclosure doesn't
something to
come
be
from
smoothed
conversation.
over
It
with
comes from
reassurance.
consequence.
When I
Amelie
failed,
asked me
it was
later what happened. I
disappointment,
told
a
her the
reflection,
truth, that
a
her father
flaw.
had made
I
choices
learned
and that
quickly that
choices matter. I
gratitude was
told her the
expected
system
from
worked
me, but
because
trust was
someone
reserved
stood
for
up,
blood.
and she
So I
nodded like she
adapted.
understood
I
something
became
bigger than her.
observant. I
H.
learned
Daniel
to
moved
read
out quietly,
silences
no
the way
shouting,
other
no
children
scenes,
read
just boxers and
faces.
The
I
sound of a
learned to
door closing.
understand
I sat
glances,
alone that night, not
pauses,
triumphant,
tones.
not angry,
I
just calm.
learned
For
to
the first time in
recognize when
years, the
affection
silence
was
felt
being
earned.
offered and when it was being
Revenge is never
withdrawn
the
without
ending. It's
warning.
the
I
turning point.
learned that
People think
survival
justice brings
didn't
fireworks,
always require
celebrations. It
strength.
doesn't. It brings
Sometimes it
quiet, and
required
quiet forces you to
invisibility,
sit with
that
who you are.
intelligence
After
quiet.
everything is stripped away,
Unnoticed would
Daniel's
later become
absence
my
changed the
revenge.
house
The
immediately,
night of
not
my
because it was
adoptive
empty, but
mother's
because it was
birthday
honest.
arrived
There
like a
was no
carefully
tension to
directed film
manage, no
set.
moods
The
to
mansion
read, no
glowed
lies.
beneath
Waiting in
crystal
corners, just
chandeliers.
space, and
White
space can feel
roses lined the
frightening.
marble
Until
halls.
you learned
The
how to
air was
breathe
thick
in
with
it. Emily
perfume,
adapted faster than I
champagne, and
expected
the
children
laughter
do.
of
They
powerful
grieve
people who
honestly,
believed this
without
family
performance. She
was
asked questions,
flawless.
difficult
My
ones.
mother
Why her
wore an
father
ivory
had
gown
done
that
it,
hugged her
why adults
figure
hurt people they love.
perfectly.
He didn't
Around her
protect
neck
Daniel's
was the
image, but I
necklace.
didn't
The
poison it either.
necklace
I
was
told her the
legendary,
truth
a
gently, that fear
cascade of
makes people
flawless
selfish, that
diamonds,
love without
cold and
integrity isn't love,
brilliant,
and that
worth
none of
over
it
$1
was her
million.
fault. She
It
believed
wasn't
me that
just
mattered
jewelry, it
more
was a
than any verdict.
symbol
The trust
of
fund was
heritage,
restored with
of
interest, with
pride,
penalties,
of
but the
trust.
money felt
My
different now.
father had
Fia, more
retrieved it from a
meaningful because it
private
had been defended.
international vault
People
just for
treated me
this night.
differently.
When my
Friends spoke
mother
carefully.
stepped into the
Family
room,
listened more. I hadn't
conversation
changed.
stopped.
They had
People
strength
stared,
makes people
then
uncomfortable,
applauded. I
especially
stood
when
near
it's
the
quiet.
back,
Daniel tried to reach out
watching,
months
and I
after an email,
remember
short,
thinking how
apologetic. I
strange
didn't
it was
respond.
that an
Forgiveness
object
doesn't
could be
require access.
cherished more
Lawrence Company
deeply than a
dissolved.
person
Quietly,
who
no
had spent
headlines,
her
no
entire
apologies,
life
just
trying
another
to
failed
belong.
startup. I didn't feel
Lucas moved
satisfaction.
easily
I
among the
felt closure. The
guests.
most unexpected
Charming,
change came in my
laughing, but
Steffi.
I noticed
Stopped
things others
explaining,
didn't.
stopped
His
softening my
fingers
words, stopped
fidgeted
shrinking to keep
constantly.
pace.
His
I
eyes
learned that
kept
love isn't
drifting
proven
toward the
by endurance,
staircase.
it's proven
And when
by
my mother
boundaries won.
excused
Night
herself
Emily
to
asked me
rest before the
something. Mom, are
final
we safe
toast,
now? I didn't
Lucas
answer
disappeared
immediately.
moments
Safety isn't
later. I
permanent, it's maintained.
noticed.
But I looked
I
at her, at
always
our home,
noticed.
at
The
the life we
scream came
rebuilt,
just
and I
after
said yes
midnight.
because this
Sharp,
time it was true. I
terrified,
don't hate.
my
My
mother
ex-husband
stood
hate
frozen in her
requires
private
energy I
suite,
reserve, mine
staring
for
at the
living. I
open velvet
used to believe
box on her
silence meant
dressing
weakness.
table.
Now
The
I know
necklace was gone
silence can be
in
strategy,
seconds.
patience
The
can be
mansion
power, and
transformed
justice
from a
doesn't need an
palace into
audience.
a
It only
prison.
needs
Security
truth.
sealed